Hi everybody, how you doing? I really hope that you've been enjoying this Facebook Live series so far, and I know that I have the videos that I've been able to check out. They've been wonderful and such a blessing. But I'm Aimee Imbeau, and I blog over at A Work of Grace. I can't remember how long I've been blogging for. It's been a while. It seems like the years kind of just blur all together. I'm also a teacher, a certified teacher, and I help homeschool families teach their kids. And I work with a DL school, Heritage Christian Online School, here in BC, Canada. And I've been doing that for I'm going into my 13th year or something like that. So it's been a long time since I started that journey of into homeschooling. But this year, actually, I have some exciting news. I'm going to be on the TOC list, Teacher on Call list, at the local Christian school. So just a little bit of fun for me to be able to get into a classroom again and teach some kids. So I'm really excited about that. But on my blog, I don't really write a whole bunch about homeschool. So if you're not a homeschooler, you'll be happy to hear that. So I do, once in a while, I do blog a little bit about that. But my heart is really about living in freedom, learning to live in freedom, and continuing to live in freedom. I blog about marriage. I write about marriage. I love being married, and I also write about parenting and generally about Christian living for women mostly. A few of my last marriage blog posts were kind of more about the husband's job, like of washing his wife in the Word and spiritually leading his family, but I wasn't writing it directed to men. It was for men, kind of, but so a wife can understand what a godly husband is supposed to, how he's supposed to lead. So those were that was my last marriage series, not too long ago. How long have I been married? In May next year, my husband and I will be celebrating our 20th anniversary, and it feels like, it seems like a long time, sounds like a long time, but it really doesn't feel like it. It's like the years have gone by so fast. We have 3 kids, a 16-year-old, and she delights my heart. You hear all these things about teenagers and the dreadful, rebellious teenage years, but I can tell you, you don't believe that, if that's not what you're expecting, and if you are teaching, you're helping your kids walk with God, then you don't need to dread that. You don't need to think that teenage years are bad, because they're not. They're wonderful. I'm 13-year-old, so I got 2 teenagers, and an 11-year-old, my baby. So we have a lot of fun with them, and my husband and I both work from home. We've been doing that for a long time. My husband's been working from home for 8 years or so. So all 5 of us are home all together all the time. And yeah, you don't get through almost 20 years of marriage unscathed. It just doesn't happen. We have been through a lot in our marriage. When we first got married, he was not a believer. I was. In fact, before we got married, we were even living together, and not ideal, but if I remember, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I was a believer. I was a believer in Jesus, but I did not have Jesus as Lord of my life, and that there's a difference, okay? There's a difference with that. But I did believe in Jesus, and I did love him, and I really, really wanted to live my life the way that I should, but I wasn't. So my husband was not a believer, and that was hard. That was really hard, because of course we're not going to see eye to eye on many things. If we're not seeing eye to eye on the spiritual things, then that's going to affect everything else. It's going to affect morality. It's going to affect how we get along and how we resolve conflict. It's going to affect so many things. After a year of marriage, I disclosed something that nobody expected. Nobody knew. I told my family, I told my husband first that when I was a child, I was sexually assaulted by 3 different men, over the years, starting at age 6. And he was not ready for that. I mean, who's ready for that? Nobody's ready for that kind of news. And he wasn't ready for all of that baggage that came along with it. I wasn't ready for it because I didn't know, I had no idea the amount of baggage that I had been dragging around, because that was all repressed. Everything was repressed. And the darkness that came with that was, it was so consuming. It consumed every part of me. And it was so dark at one point that I was ready just to take my own life. I did not want to live anymore. I did not want to be here. And I'm so thankful. I look back and it's pretty tough. I kept a journal back then, and every now and then I'll go and read the things that I wrote, and it breaks my heart. It makes me cry because I can't believe that I survived that. I can't believe that I am who I am now, such a totally different person than what I was back then. And so I guess it's just also another reason that keeping a journal is a good thing, because then you go and see what God's brought you through. You go and see what He's redeemed, what He's restored, and what He's made whole. Something that was devastated and broken and beyond repair. He came in and He repaired it, and He fixed it. And I actually read some excerpts from my journal in my Bible study on John, and it was hard for me to get through that because of the brokenness. That it's just amazing. It's amazing just to go back and see what God has brought you through. And that's another reason why we have the scriptures, right? Because then we see what God has brought all of our ancestors through, all of our spiritual ancestors. And of course we all came from Adam and Eve, right? Anyway, let's move on. I was so broken, and you see, that trauma, the trauma of sexual assault, that affects all areas of your life, every single aspect. And sometimes you know that's what's affecting it, and then sometimes you don't know, you don't realize it, because it's just so it's so sinister, it's so evil. But that doesn't affect my life like that anymore. And I want to give that hope, because I know that there are women out there who have experienced similar things that I've experienced, and that hope is gone. That hope is gone. But I want you to know that our God is so good. He is so, so, so good. And He redeems and He restores. I am free. I am free from the effects of this childhood sexual assault. I am free from that. And so you have that hope too, to be free from it. Does that mean that doesn't hurt? No, there's still that ache. There's still that ache. But it's not something that is consuming my life. It's not something that is affecting my marriage anymore. It did, but it's not anymore. A quote that I have really treasured over the years is from the bottom part of my Bible, I think. Yeah, it's from the bottom part of my Bible. Couldn't remember if it's the bottom part of my Bible or a book that I've read by Bishop T.D. Jakes. And it says, "Some little girl needs to know your recipe for survival. Somewhere in the streets, there is someone dying because she does not know that it is possible to survive what you have already endured. You are a precious commodity. You are a cure to her crisis." A cure because we preach the gospel. We are showing what Jesus has done, can do. And so I'm hoping that encourages some of you as well, that yes, yeah, you can survive. It's possible to survive and thrive and live an abundant life in spite of all that crap. You can do it, and that you are precious. You are so, so precious. If that's something that you are dealing with, I know Anna was sharing a bit, I think it was yesterday or the night before. See, everything just blurs into one for me. It's all it's all together. But I just remember listening to her and her brokenness and intimacy. There were times when I would have flashbacks, and it was very difficult. But that's where communication comes in with your husband. I had to tell Marcus, like, this is what's happening, and this is what's happening when we make love, that I start having these flashbacks. And so when that happens, I'm just going to say stop. You just need to say one word, stop. And it's not something that he's going to take offense to. He didn't take offense to it, but he knew, okay, I need, for the health of my wife and to help lead her through that, to help her lead her into healing. I mean, he wasn't a Christian at this time. Remember, he wasn't a Christian, okay? And he had to speak softly to me and bring me back into the present of where we were, okay? And it was just all part of the healing, and I don't have those flashbacks anymore. I don't. And it's taken a long time. It's taken a very long time. It took a good 16 years before I could say that God has completely healed me. And so I'm hoping that gives you hope too, and hope, and just knowing that God does want to restore. He wants to restore every part of the marriage, including intimacy. Yeah, he does, because that's so important, because that's a spiritual connection between husband and wife. Okay? It's very important. So during that same time, that I was starting to go through that, and disclosing and working through all that, and going through the darkness of because I didn't deal with it when I was 6, when I was 8, when I was 10, when I was 12. I didn't deal with that then. I dealt with it when I was like 22, and so all those feelings, all that it just came down on me. And so during that same time, my in-laws got a divorce. And this caused Marcus to question our marriage, and he was ready to give up. He came up with this saying, and we hear it in movies all the time. I love you, but I'm not in love with you. And really, there's no difference. Love is love, right? But that's what he said. That's what he was believed, because of course, Hollywood speaks the truth all the time, right? Hollywood knows what they're talking about. So that's what he was saying, and he was just really confused and hurting. He was hurting. So when these things happen, you need to take a look at that. What is really going on? There's a root there. There is a root. And that root for him was that immense pain that after 30 years, his parents were splitting up, were getting a divorce, and that is painful. It doesn't matter how old you are, if you're a child or an adult, divorce hurts. It really does. It's very painful. But I thought our marriage was over. But I'm so glad that his mom actually talked some sense into him. She's not a Christian either, okay? She's not now either, but at least she was able to talk some sense into her son. So the first 8 years of our marriage were tough. Marcus drank too much. He wasn't an alcoholic, but he still drank too much. My dad was an alcoholic, and he, because of his alcoholism, he died in an accident when I was 3. So I know that my husband was not an alcoholic, but he did drink too much. And he was probably right on the verge of becoming an alcoholic. It was very close. And that caused a lot of problems. It caused a lot of problems because, when you drink, you're not yourself. So I also went back to university for my teaching degree, and we had our first child. And Marcus, he was a good dad, a wonderful dad, but he wasn't the spiritual leader of the home. I was. And that is not something a wife should be carrying. That's not our responsibility. Yeah, we have major influence in the spiritual direction of the family, but the husband is the one who is really supposed to be leading that, as with every other aspect of the family. And but then we decided to have another child, but that pregnancy ended in miscarriage. And that had an effect on our marriage. It was hard. Pregnancy loss is hard. So hard. And we learned to walk through that together. Keep in mind, he still was not a Christian. Okay? And so that made it difficult to walk through that when we weren't evenly yoked. By that time, things were starting to get a bit better in our marriage. We had moved, and he wasn't with some of those people who would encourage him to have a drink or more. So things were starting to get a little bit better, and we tried for a second child, and I gave birth to our son. And then after that, my husband, somehow he started to look at pornography. And again, this caused problems, of course, right? It just, any sin will cause problems. And it was very painful and difficult to go through and try and get him to stop and understand how it hurts and it's not healthy. But God is so good. Ladies, he is so, so good. For those first 8 years, I cried out to God for my husband's salvation. And I learned a lot during those years. I learned to not look to Marcus for my identity, because he can't tell me who I am. I learned to seek God for my greatest expectations. I learned that in order for God to make Marcus into the godly husband that I needed him to be, I had to first be the godly wife that God desired me to be. I had to start with me, because he's not going to change my husband into somebody I needed if I wasn't willing to have Jesus as Lord of my life. What's the point of that? I had to make the change first. What do you think about that? What do you think about that statement? That I had to be the first one to change. I had to first be the godly wife that God intended me to be before he was going to make any changes in my husband's heart. It's not easy. That's not always an easy thing to hear. It wasn't easy for me. And it was hard. Very hard. I learned that, I'm just reading some of the comments. Yeah, it is hard to change, just because then you have to get rid of that pride. When you have to change, you have to get rid of that pride. You have to come into that change with humility, so much humility. Oftentimes Marcus would say that just because I was a Christian didn't mean I knew more than he did. And he was right. Often he would know a lot more than what I did about grace and about forgiveness and love. And so that I had to really lay down my pride. And I had to be the first to change. I had to be walking closely with the Lord. That's what I had to do. And then this one time I was just driving in my car and just driving on the highway and just crying out to God again. I had started making those changes. I started looking to the Lord for my greatest expectations and for healing and for redemption and restoration, and starting to become the wife that I ought to be. And I just crying out to God, asking him to do something with my husband's heart, to soften it and change it, and to bring him to faith in Jesus Christ. And I just quieted my heart and heard God say, Aimee, don't worry. Don't you worry about your husband, because I'm going to get him. And when I do, I'm going to hit him hard. And he is going to follow me. And before we became pregnant with our third child, God fulfilled that promise to me. Marcus came to faith in Jesus Christ and proclaimed him as Lord of his life. Becky, we so want the husband to be the one to change, but God often asks us to lay down our pride, as you're saying. Why change our husband if we are going to stay the same? Exactly. And that's not easy. I know you know that. But it is good, right? It is good. We see the blessings of that. So that made a huge change in our marriage when my husband came to faith in Jesus. And I'm going to tell you, it was hardcore. There was no doubt about it. That change was incredible. So when two people have Jesus as Lord of their lives, it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. And it was really good. It was good, and it's such a blessing. One of the biggest issues, though, that I had, you see, I was the Christian coming into marriage, and he was not, and yet I was the one with the biggest issues. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. One of the biggest issues, besides the sexual assault and getting that dealt with, I had a problem with leaving and cleaving. Yeah, that was tough. That was really, really tough. I realize now that a big part of that was because there's mental illness in my family. One of my parents has symptoms of mental illness. I have to be really careful with what I say, right? And that made it so hard for me to leave and cleave, because that they wouldn't let go. They just refused to let go. They were so over involved in our marriage and in our parenting in every single aspect of our lives. And so they made it very hard, because if I did something that was out of line with them, it's like a mine would go off. Boom. It was really crazy. It was not good at all. And when I finally started making those boundaries, my parents were not happy at all. They did not like it, because they no longer had that control. Somebody else was, managing that. Of course, it was God, but my husband, because he was taking his role of being the godly husband, he started taking control of that and started leading, and they did not like it at all. And boundaries were blurred, not respected, and I would try to set them. And so when you've lived so long with your boundaries not being respected, then it's really hard to set them and enforce them. And when somebody doesn't care about your boundaries and constantly disregards your voice, then you begin to believe that your voice doesn't matter. And when someone belittles you and yells at you for the most ridiculous things, even when you're 40 years old, what 40-year-old needs her mom yelling at her for stupid things, right? Oh, that was my coffee maker. My coffee's done, I guess. When you tell when you say the most vicious things to your child, even your adult child, and you spread gossip on social media, those things eventually they take a toll, mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. They take a toll, and that sort of thing would occurred over a span of over 25 years. And when a relationship like that interferes with your marriage, then something needs to be done. It needs to be done. And it's okay to distance yourself for as long as you need to in order to heal and in order to really get a grasp of what's true and what's not. I haven't spoken to my parents in over 2 years. And it's been the best thing that the best decision that we've made. It's not ideal. It's not what I had always wanted. It's not, but there was no indication of change, no indication of getting help for that mental illness, and so we had to just step back. So over almost 20 years that I've been married, I've never stopped praying for my husband. Anything good that has come from my marriage has been through prayer. My husband came to faith in Jesus because of prayer. Not my nagging, not my inviting him to church 1,000 times, Not my religious pride, for sure, not my religious pride. Not my begging, not my preaching. That was my prayers. When there has been difficulty in our marriage, either from inside between us or from the outside, it has been prayer that has helped us through. It's helped us weather the storms. So never stop praying. Never ever stop praying for your husband. Never give up. Don't give up. Friends, my husband and I are at what we'd call the good stuff of marriage right now. That doesn't mean that we don't have problems, we don't have issues. That we'll always have that as long as we're here on this earth and we are in battle, and we are in constant battle. When you're in a marriage, either in a troubled marriage or a healthy marriage, either one, you're in a battle. But we've gotten to the point where we understand that we are on each other's side. We must be for each other. For each other. Other than God, all we have is each other. You look at the Proverbs 31 woman, and we see that there's 3 relationships that are the most important to her. There's only 3. It's God, it's her husband, and her children. Not her parents. I mean, I'm sure maybe she did have a good relationship with her parents. I don't know. But those are not pivotal in her marriage. And there's no friends mentioned because they are not pivotal in her marriage. They are not the biggest influencers of her marriage. It's just God, her husband, and her kids. That's it. That doesn't mean you can't have friends, right? Doesn't mean you shouldn't have a good relationship with your parents. And those things are good, but they're not pivotal, okay? And when you get to that point in your marriage, then when you both realize that and that's the way that it should be in a marriage, then it changes your perspective. It changes how you argue. It changes how you resolve issues. It changes how quickly you forgive and reconcile. Marcus is my best friend. He's my best friend. I don't want to stay arguing with him. I don't want to stay mad at him. I don't want to keep dragging things around in my life, in my marriage, because I want to be healthy with him. And that's really when you become one flesh, as God meant marriage to be. When you start realizing those things, we understand what that means and what that looks like, and that has really helped us become one flesh. But it's taken a lot, so much more than what I can say in a Facebook Live video. It's taken us a lot to get there. A lot of garbage we've had to work through and wade through. So, don't compare your marriage to mine. Don't compare it to anybody else's that you see up there. Because when you start comparing and wishing that you had a marriage like somebody else, then that means you got to take those good things and you got to take those bad things. Sometimes we might know what those bad things are, but most of the time we don't. You don't want my garbage. You don't want the things that we've had to walk through. You don't want something where you don't have a good relationship with your family members. You don't want that. You want the marriage that God meant for you and your husband to have. And you focus on that. You focus on your marriage, not somebody else's. Not somebody else's, because you don't want all that other stuff that they've had to walk through. Okay? So never stop praying for your husband. Always, every day. Never stop praying for him. It's so important. My husband, he'll be the first to tell you that he treasures my prayers for him. Even now, even today, he treasures me as his wife praying for him, because nobody can pray for your husband like you can. Nobody. Nobody can storm those gates like you can. Nobody can fight for your husband on your knees like you can. So don't give up on prayer. Don't do that. And remember, the enemy hates marriage. He hates marriage because of what it represents. Do you know what that represents? Do you know what marriage represents? It represents the gospel. And when you start seeing that, that changes things too. When you start understanding that your marriage is representative of the gospel, of Jesus, the bridegroom, and the church, the bride, that's going to change a lot of things for you too. Okay, you are representing the gospel to the world through your marriage. That is big. That's big. Write that one down. Write it down. And I've written about it, and I've done webinars about it and stuff like that. So remember that your marriage represents the gospel message. It represents the redemption of Jesus Christ. It represents healing. It represents restoration. Pray for those things. Pray for those. Pray that life into your marriage. If it's not what it is right now, if you start seeing your husband as the only other person that you have on this earth, start seeing him like that. We like to go and talk to our friends about all of our problems. Forget that. Your husband is the only other person you have. That doesn't mean you can't go and get godly wisdom from other people. I'm not saying that, because godly wisdom is so important. And I understand how important it is, because people come to us for that. And I love it when older couples will come into our lives and speak truth into our lives and confirm things and to encourage us in our marriage. So important. But when you have that mindset that your husband really is the only other person that you have, there's no escape. There's no way out. Unless you're in an abusive marriage. I got to add that. I got to make sure that you understand this, okay? I'm not talking about an abusive marriage. I am talking about, I'm just talking about marriage, not abusive marriage, okay? I've already told you that if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to take some steps to get help with that, okay? Because when I had to take those steps with my family, okay? So I understand what abuse does. I know. So, but when you start seeing your husband as the only other person you have, even if that's not your situation right now, your marriage is so on the brink of ending, on devastation, on destruction. Start praying. Start praying that it will be that way. Start believing the Lord for this, for your marriage. Believe it. And wait for the good stuff. Wait for it. Expect it. If God can do what he's done for us, for Marcus and I, in our marriage, if he can do that for us, believe me, he can do that for anybody. Because I sure had a whole heck of a lot of baggage coming in. He did too, but I'm sure that I had a whole lot more. I'm going to be writing about unity in marriage in Tiffany's series. And by the way, Tiffany, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I meant to say that at the beginning, and I kind of started rambling on getting into my stuff here. But thank you so much for inviting me into this series. Marriage, good, healthy, strong marriages is really my heart, and being confident in knowing that it is possible. No matter what, it is possible. So thank you for that. So my post will be on unity in marriage, and that will be going live on the 24th. And I'm also giving away, I think we agreed 10, right, Tiffany, of my 5-day Bible studies on becoming a valiant and biblical wife. This will encourage you so much. This will encourage your heart as a wife. One of those giveaways, it will be from the comments in this video, in this Facebook Live video. I don't know if Tiffany will pick it, or we'll figure that out, I'm sure. And then there's the other giveaway that Tiffany can maybe put a link to it, or I can later on in the comments. There's that. So that's really all I have to say. That's all I have to share with you guys today. I don't even know how long I've been. So certainly more than 10 minutes, but that's all right. Should we pray? Do you want to pray with me about marriages? You want to do that? Let's do that, okay? So, Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the gift of marriage. We thank you that you decided to make marriage representative of your gospel message. The fact that you sent your Son down here on earth to save us and to restore and to heal and to redeem. He is our Redeemer. And that we can show that in our marriages and start displaying who you are and the hope that you offer us in our marriages. And I just thank you for the ladies that are in this series, the contributors and the readers, the listeners, and the ladies out there who are hurting so much in their marriage. Lord, we just lift those up to you, and we place those marriages right at the foot of the cross for you to deal with, for you to handle, for you to take care of, and to show your glory, because everything you do, you want to be glorified. And I ask that you will be glorified through these marriages today, and that you will start that healing, you'll start that redemption and restoration, Lord, and you'll just encourage the hearts of these wives that they will turn to you at every problem, every issue, that they will just turn to you immediately and ask for your wisdom and guidance, because anybody who asks for wisdom, you grant it in abundance, and that you will grant that, you'll bestow wisdom on these women, on these wives, and that they will work towards a healthy marriage, and they will fight so hard for their marriage and for their husbands. We thank you so much that Tiffany has taken this on, that you have placed this passion, this calling into her heart, into her life, Lord, and I ask that you will just bless her and her marriage and her family tremendously, and that you will protect her and her family from any attack from the enemy, Lord. And we just commit all of this and all this series to you, Lord Jesus, and that your will be done, and that you will be glorified through it all. In your name, Jesus. Amen. All right. Oh, good. She's got the link up there. That's great. So, thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. And I'll be in touch with Tiffany to figure out about the winner for the study for the comments in this video. So, until then, bye. Love you too, Becky. Thank you.